Welcome everyone to the 2025 Fall Medical Summit here brought to you by the Male Breast Cancer Global Alliance. And our first speaker is here. I'd like to introduce Naomi Litchfield. She is the Director of Patient Advocacy at Bionical Emas. And now I'm going to stop sharing so you can have the floor.
Amazing. Thank you much, Sherry. What a pleasure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm dialing in from York in the UK, so it's afternoon for me. Hi, everyone. So I'm Naomi Litchfield, Director of Patient Advocacy at Bionical Emas, and we are an early access provider company. So early access is access to an investigational medicine that is before it's proven to be safe and effective. So for patients that don't have anything approved that's available to them, and they're not available for clinical trials, that's where early access comes in. And I'll explain that in a bit more detail. But just to give you a little bit of my background, I've been with the company nearly 8 years now. And yeah, a pleasure being Patient Advocacy Director, because I get to work with lots of different patient organisations and ensure that their patient voice, so their perspectives and insights and experiences is incorporated into the design and delivery of our early access programmes. Before I did that, I was 15 years clinically as a research nurse working with patients and families. And actually, my sister is a cancer survivor, and it was an investigational medicine that saved her life. So I have that personal passion and drive. And I also lost both my grandparents to breast cancer. So it means a lot to me to be here today to speak to you as a community. And I hope that I can answer any questions that you have, and just want to thank the team for inviting me here today. So thank you so much. So who are Bionical Emas and what kind of work that we do? So as I said, we're an early access provider, but we do a lot of collaboration, and we're very proud to co-create our early access programs with patient groups. And we do a lot of awareness about what early access is. And we have a podcast, and we have patients coming in to speak to us. And we do a lot of steering committees, focus groups, but also training and awareness, like I'm doing today, talking about what early access is, where it fits in the clinical development pathway, different resources and webinars, which I'll share with you today, and like the history and kind of different policies and frameworks. And we enjoy going to conferences with families and helping them share their early access stories and journeys, and how that access to investigational medicine has impacted their lives. So what is early access? So after the diagnosis that you have, and obviously today we're talking about men living with breast cancer, you're then offered approved treatment first, but often the approved treatment isn't suitable or doesn't work. And then the next stage is clinical trials. But again, if you're not eligible for a clinical trial, or there's no clinical trial that you can access that investigational medicine, the third kind of window of opportunity to get treatment is the early access. But it's very important to understand that you can't have early access to an investigational medicine until you've exhausted all other options. And just to confuse us all, and I've been working in this space over a decade, but I still get confused. Every single company and every single country calls early access something different. So in the US, it's known as expanded access, and that's the expanded access policies, and that's what's known as used as that term by the FDA. But here in England, where I am, it's normally termed early access. In Canada, it's a special access scheme. Some companies call it pre-approval access, but obviously that would mean that it is always approved, but it's not always approved. And then you might get a named patient request or compassionate use request, or they might call it a cohort expanded access route, which is a cohort of people, of patients. But it all means the same thing, which is access to investigational medicine outside of a clinical trial, and they must not be eligible for a clinical trial or anything approved, and have to have exhausted all of those options before your treating physician can request that access. I can't see the chat, so if there's anyone that asks questions, please let me know. These are just some feedback that I've collected over the years of what patients and families have said to me of what it means to them to participate in an early access programme. So, having that kind of treatment and having a bit of a lifeline or a lifeboat of just access to any kind of treatment that has really meant so much to them, and it can be life-changing, and in some circumstances it's been life-saving. So how do patients and families get access to investigation medicine? Well, they must have a life-threatening condition and have exhausted all options, and like I said, not be eligible for any clinical trials. And then this is something that patients and families need to request and discuss with their treating physician and weigh up the risks and benefits, and obviously the benefit outweigh the risks. And then it has to be an unsolicited request from the treating physician to the manufacturing pharmaceutical company. And they might have an early access program already set up, and they'll share patient eligibility if there's an inclusion-exclusion criteria. However, sometimes they're in early stages and they haven't set up an early access or expanded access program yet, and they might consider a one-off compassionate use. But the treating physician needs to say yes, and the company needs to say yes. So you need 2 yeses from the treating physician and the company before the patient can receive treatment. But it's then still the treating physician's responsibility to monitor that patient and report any safety concerns, or if they're wanting to collect data, to collect what they call real world data, which is different than being in a clinical trial. Lots of different considerations for pharmaceutical companies before they can set up an early access program. So we always advise to engage early with the patient community so you really understand the burden of the condition and the different treatments that are out there. Often in rarer cancers, there isn't other treatment, or there might be alternatives. So it's understanding that and what this new product's going to do. And I suppose the reputation of the company, if they're getting lots of requests for early access from patients and families and physicians, if they don't do one, how will that affect their kind of relationship with the community? Having a clear communication strategy to the patients and families and healthcare professionals. And also we have our company, and we're very fortunate to work with the New York University bioethicists. So getting bioethical support, because often there'll be more requests than there is access to the supply of drug. So it's really important to know ethically how to treat patients, and the order, if they're going to do first come, first served, or randomization. And some companies do a lottery. There's lots of different ways, but I think there's lots of ethics that goes behind that, and it's good to get bioethical support. And then look at the considerations of if there are enough drug supply, and how is administered the investigation medicine, because an oral drug is a lot less complex to administer than, say, an intrathecal medication or even an IV. And if it can be done at home or in the hospital, and the hospital's set up for early access, because approved medicines would go to, say, wards, and the clinical trials are normally run in clinical research facilities, but early access is kind of in a limbo. It's not on a clinical trial, it's not approved, so where are those patients going to go and how they're going to be funded. And then every single country has a different regulatory pathway to access an early access medication, and has to be approved by that health authority. So there's a lot of documents that need to be signed, and it all needs to be approved before the shipment of the medication and the pack. And again, it's not a clinical trial pack, it's not an approved pack, it's an investigation medicine outside the trial. So again, there's different regulations that need to be on the medicine before being shipped. There's lots of different ways to open an early access program. Some are done in waves, or they'll say start in the US and then go to other countries, or they might just start globally straight away. And there's lots of timelines and things that they need to consider before starting. Often in early access programs, there's real world data collection, because this can help with regulatory approval. So the FDA, Health Canada, EMA, all the regulatory authorities would look at the data, because these are patients that are outside their trials, and if this investigation medicine is working in those populations, it can help with getting it approved to be safe and effective for everybody. Are you going to charge or not? Some pharmaceutical companies do charge for their early access programs. Some give free of charge, or will be free of charge until it's approved. What impact is this going to have on patients and families, and how they're going to determine that communication and the eligibility criteria, and really getting their input on their thoughts and perspectives and experiences, and how they're going to communicate the cost and everything else that comes around it, because often it could be a free of charge drug, but then there's no cost covering for, say, administration or traveling, and lots of kind of different support. And then obviously, as we know, the drug might get approved, but unfortunately it might not. So it's having a clear plan and a strategy for both those things, so that it's really clear and transparent from the start. Compliance is really important, and something that I often get questioned about, like, why can't early access programs be promoted like clinical trials can? And plain and simply, they are investigational medicines, and it's outside of a clinical trial. They're not proved to be safe and effective yet, so they can't be promoted in any way. And unfortunately, it does have to be your treating physician that requests the access to the investigational medicine. And any kind of promotion that the pharmaceutical company did is seen as non-compliant, and they can face fines. So all the communication around the early access programs need to be reactive. So obviously, if the community is already speaking to the pharmaceutical companies and have that relationship with them, and ask them, are you thinking about doing an early access program? What would that look like, the eligibility criteria, and we would like to have input in shaping that and co-creating it, then that's absolutely fine, and you can respond to those questions. So again, I would always encourage patient groups to ask the companies for their thoughts on early access and what plans they have, because they can answer questions that are reactive. They just can't be proactive. And it's just really that they don't want to risk misleading patients, because again, this medicine is in development and it could fail. So it's just being really transparent with where it is in the regulatory and clinical development pathway, and if there's been any safety concerns, and when's the right time to do an expanded access or an early access program. Some are done as early as phase 1, some are done later in phase 3 or phase 4. So it's just great to ask and speak to your treating physician. But as patient groups, I'd say, always collaborate with the companies and have these conversations early, consistently, and transparently. What can companies do? Well, companies can share the factual policies if they are going to do early access or not. In the US, it's great that you've got the 21st Century Act, because we're not covered there here in the UK. But in the US you are, and that mandates all companies should have an early access policy on their website, to say if they're doing it or not, and then links to, say, clinicaltrials.gov, and they can put the inclusion and exclusion criteria in there. But really, they can speak to the patient community reactively, and the physicians, and it's good to get their insight on timing for early access, for expanded access, and scientific input and any safety concerns that they have. So there is still a lot that they can do. It's just got to be in a very reactive way. But if you've already got those great relationships with the companies, then those conversations hopefully are already happening. Any questions, let me know. So this is a lovely card that I love and that I give out. I've got them here as like a handout. Every conference that I go to, I give these to pharmaceutical companies to say, this is kind of best practice for really ensuring your early access program is patient-centered, and that you're co-creating it with the patient community. These conversations should be happening early, consistently, often, and transparent and honestly, so that you have those engagement right from the start, and that there's an internal buy-in of wanting to do an early access or expanded access program, and what that's going to look like, and what the policy says. We've had patient groups that have reviewed pharmaceutical companies' EAP policy and made them a bit more patient friendly, and linked them to clinicaltrials.gov, and really had some communication plans that are co-created with the community. And then obviously looking at the actual program itself is doing the eligibility criteria, and if they're collecting real world data, what data are we collecting, that's least burdensome and clinically meaningful to the community. And often, again, patients and families need support. So is it travel support? Is it, funding? What do they need? And obviously the only people that know that is the patients and families themselves. So it's just making sure that you're co-creating that together. And then we've created lots of different resources to either how to give the medication, or questions around what expanded access means and when the expanded access program might close and what will happen. Different videos, and like what is an early access program, what is real world data, things like that we've created with patient communities. So yeah, and just to foster that kind of positive relationship and have input into the design and delivery of the programs, because they're for you and should be created with you. So what types of engagement? Well, we've sat with patient groups to do like protocol and early access policy input, and also the informed consent forms and the patient information sheets, and made them more appropriate for those patient communities. Lots of different steering committees, as I said, and just tailoring them for those patients and families, and got lots of different surveys and feedback that have then been submitted to the regulatory authorities. There's lots of different communications that can go out, and I think these just need to be proactively planned before the early access program starts, and making sure that there's regular kind of a feedback two-way on from the families that are on the expanded access programs, and also, like I've said, having that kind of bioethical support if there is challenging decisions to make, if there's more requests than there is drug supply, and how they're ethically made, and with transparency and with the community together. This was just a slide to illustrate that some patients want that chance to have access and want that chance to have treatment. I used to work in Grosvenor Street in London. That was me giving a medicine to a new boy, a boy living with Duchenne, and he just said to me that I know this medicine might not help me, but I hope it helps the doctors and nurses make boys like me better in the future. And that's really stuck with me for like the last 20 years, really, that actually it's not always the medicine, it's just the hope and the access to it, and the fact that everyone here today that takes a risk of taking investigational medicine is helping the future patients. And it's very altruistic, and just, yeah, to thank anyone that has taken that risk, because you're helping the future generation. We've got lots of resources on our website. So what is an early access program? What is real world data? Lots of different papers and posters and videos and podcasts. So if anyone's interested, there's links that I can send after this. And then the last slide is just different resources. So the FDA and EMA websites have lots of expanded access resources and case studies if you're interested, and then a few other examples there, but obviously looking on your pharmaceutical company's website to see if they've got a policy and any information around expanded access, and obviously the patient advocacy groups have information if they are doing early access advocacy and work. And I'll leave all the links and resources with you, so that if you have any questions and want to look up any of these other places, and please do. Clinicaltrials.gov often have expanded access programs on their website as well, and there's a clinicaltrials.hub that also has some early access or expanded access programs. But that's it. that's me, really. It's just a very high level overview of what early access or expanded access is and where it fits in the clinical development pathway, and the compliance around it, that it must be an unsolicited request. And yeah, if you've got any questions, please let me know. But if not, thank you so much for having me, and I hope that is helpful. And please speak to your treating physicians if that's maybe a possibility for a treatment for you.
Oh, thank you, Naomi. If you can just hit the stop share,
Yeah.
that would be perfect. And I do have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is, can you give us a real life scenario or a successful story of how early access program worked for a patient? And are there limitations to rare cancers?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that question. Um, yes, so I have lots from the top of my head. But I'll just share one with you that was diagnosed with a really rare cancer and was told that only palliative care, unfortunately, would be um, the only way that they could kind of treat, and just treating symptoms, because there was nothing to treat that cancer. And unfortunately, that is what's told in very, say, small rural hospitals. But when those doctors then spoke to some bigger teaching hospitals that did clinical trials, they found out that there was a trial available for this very rare cancer, but that they were fully recruited, and they didn't fit that eligibility criteria, even if they weren't fully recruited. So the doctor had to then request early access, expanded access to that medicine, at a different hospital, and transfer their patient to that hospital. And they were accepted, and they did get like a compassionate use access, and it saved their life. And that was, yeah, 10 years ago. So it was an amazing success story for that family, and it was extremely rare. And without those doctors speaking to each other, and I suppose having that knowledge, that family would have gone home, and that person wouldn't be here anymore. They would have died. So I think that's why I'm so passionate about my role and about the awareness, because unfortunately, obviously, no healthcare professional would want to deliver the news that your family member is going to die. But unfortunately, they don't always know about the expanded access options, because I think, unfortunately, they're in very small areas often, that they're only in those kind of bigger teaching hospitals that have clinical trials. So I always say to patients and families, if you're told there's nothing, always go and check and do your research, because as much as the healthcare professionals might be telling you only the news that they know, there might be other alternative options of clinical trials and early access programs in other hospitals around the world. And that's what's, I suppose, yeah, very hard, because there's not a clear communication channel, and you can't promote that you're doing early access. You can promote clinical trials, but often, they aren't available. So, my message is always to ask other patients and groups if they know of any expanded access programs or clinical trials, because there might be an option. And if you're being told by your doctor that there's nothing, I still, not that I'm saying not believe that doctor, but I'd still say if there are any other doctors that you're working with globally that might know of new research and new investigation medicines that are being trialed, and don't stop until you've tried everywhere and everything, because there might be something that's being developed that you could have.
It's so important. We tell people all the time, never take no for an answer.
Yeah,
Always seek another opinion. And
yeah, please
that's a
do.
great
Yeah,
example of it.
yeah, exactly, because that person wouldn't be here without that early access.
Yeah. I have one other question, and it says, can a diagnostic resource join your program? I am an imaging center with partners internationally.
Oh, interesting. I
Hmm.
mean, we as a company are like a vendor, so we conduct early access, expanded access programs for pharmaceutical companies. So I suppose diagnostic centres could be used to diagnose patients to get them onto early access programs, but that isn't something that we utilise because it would need to be something that our client, the pharmaceutical company, requested. So I'd say to speak to pharmaceutical companies to see if they need support with diagnosing, say, rarer cancers and screening to get them onto their clinical trials and early access programs, because that is something that, will open an early access program and the company will think that there's going to be a lot of requests, but then because they haven't got that diagnostic odyssey, they haven't got that diagnostic journey complete, and there isn't that diagnosis, that can delay a lot of access.
Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely say to speak to companies and see if you can partner with them, and if they're doing any clinical trials of early access that they need fast diagnostic screening.
If I can get an email from this person, I will connect them if they have any further questions for
Yeah,
you.
sure. Yeah, any questions that come up later today that you think, oh, actually, I wish I'd asked that, then you can contact me anytime with any question. And I'm here to support and just encourage people to ask their treating physicians, is early access, or is expanded access, as you call it in the US, an option for me or my family? And if they don't know, ask another doctor and someone that's working in that research. So if it's a very rare breast cancer that your treating physician haven't treated, it's making sure you find someone, a doctor that has treated that, because yeah, we work a lot in rare diseases, and sometimes there's one in a million, or a few in the whole world, and it's connecting those dots, connecting those patients and families with the doctors that are developing and researching in that area.
Would you also say that you're an option for patients? I know here in the US, our FDA may approve a drug because maybe 2 or 3 men were included in a clinical trial. The majority were women, which
Right.
is the case normally. Um, when that drug gets to, say, Canada or the UK
Yeah.
or EU, anywhere, a lot of times the government stipulates that because there weren't enough men involved in the trial, the drug will not be approved for use in the men. I've had that happen twice, once in Canada and once in
Oh,
Belgium.
so sorry.
Um, just wondering if you would be an option for them.
Well, not me
Anyone who's
personally, but as in
anyone
having
who's
that,
denied that
yeah,
coverage.
having that early access option. Yeah, I think if you're denied, um, yeah, purely on sex, which is obviously, yeah, discriminatory and not equitable, just as in some children are denied when the drug is only approved in adults. Um, the parents then request expanded access or early access to the drug, and that is often granted. It is often on the treating physician, so you just need a doctor to advocate for you and want to prescribe that drug for you, because they believe that you'll have clinical benefit and they are taking responsibility for you to monitor you on that drug. So long as you've got a doctor and there's a drug that the pharma company will accept that doctor, it is normally approved. But it's just asking those questions, and the companies can't promote that be an option, so it has to be on the doctors to advocate for you and request that access and take that responsibility. So if you've got a doctor that's willing to request the access, you're halfway there, because I'd say most times the company will approve that. They'll just say, we'll give it to you, but it's your responsibility to give it to that patient.
Mm.
Which, if it's just that it's a man and not a woman, I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
Would that be different though in the UK? Because when you're saying the company would give it to you, obviously the companies are willing to give the drug. It's been approved for use in the men. It's
Yeah.
just when the government gets involved. So is that something that the doctor would have to appeal on your behalf with the
Yeah, the doctor
government?
would have to appeal. Yeah, the doctor would have to appeal. But again, like I've seen it, I haven't seen it in men and women, but I've seen it with adults and children, and that has been approved for the child because the doctors requested it. as like an early access, off-label they often call it, or compassionate use, because it's not the trial. They haven't done trials in the children, but they have the adults. But the children would die if they don't have the medicine. I think if there's nothing else approved that would work, and that there's nothing else that's going to be clinically available for them, then there's more weight and more likelihood that the health authority would approve that as well. I think it's often the administration costs as well, and the costs of the drug, because it's always about costs that comes into it as well.
Unfortunately.
Yeah,
But you can't, you can't put a price on someone's life.
on
That's
someone's
really
life.
the hard part.
Absolutely not. No, and that's the thing with these expensive investigational medicines. It's one hurdle getting it proved to be safe, but then it's almost worse if it then is safe and approved, but no one will pay for it. So there's two kind of mountains to climb, and negotiating that reimbursement and that cost here. There's many drugs going through what they call NICE in England, to get them reimbursed. But patients are still requesting that early access because it's not readily available yet, because it's not reimbursed. And sometimes they'll be on what they call post-trial access programs to kind of bridge that gap. But obviously, if the drug isn't reimbursed or it does fail, then the company has to decide if they're going to keep those patients on drug or not. And they often do. So yeah, it all just depends on the administration, the drug, and the company. So it's not one size fits all. It's different every time, in my experience.
Yeah, but it's nice to know you have options.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
thanks for
And that's
giving
all I'd
us an
say.
option.
Yeah, it's ask. Yeah, all I'd say is ask. And like, you said, don't take no for an answer. Keep trying and keep asking.
I have another question for you.
Oh.
Oh, does your program get involved in finding grants or other monies from donors, especially for those really expensive drugs?
Oh, that's a great question. And I wish I could, honestly, but I think, yeah, because of compliance and the stipulation of that pharmaceutical companies are our clients and they're the ones that are developing the medicine. We are running the early access or expanded access on their behalf. So when we're setting up these programs, that is always one of the first questions, is in how's this going to be paid for? And it's kind of costed in. And then if there's more patient support, that is asked for, and often the companies will partner with organisations to make sure that it's equitable. But we don't run those programs ourselves. I think it's just that we're supporting companies to ensure that all patients can have access, and that strategy is transparently done before it opens, so that no one's left not knowing if they can have access because of the cost to it. And again, as you know, in the US, it's different negotiations with different insurance policies, depending where you are, and the kind of cover that you have. So again, it's just asking up front before you take part in a clinical trial or an expanded access program, what's covered financially.
Do you get involved in finding genetic versions of a drug?
Again, it's up to the pharma company, because they're our client. Of how much we're doing on them. We are conducting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Generic.
Generic
Generic version of a
version.
drug.
Right. We have a CTS, a clinical trial supply department that do, and they ship generics as well as the investigational medicine to different trials. So we do have that part of our business, which is really helpful for clinical trials. But when it comes to expanded access, no, we just conduct the expanded access program.
Okay. So the answer would be yes, you do get involved in finding the generic version?
For clinical trials, but not for expanded access programs.
Okay.
That's separate.
Okay.
Well, I
I
hope that was
think
helpful,
I
and it was
think
an
we've
absolute
answered
pleasure
them.
to speak to you all today.
If I
Yeah,
get any more, I'll definitely pass them to you and we'll get the answers out
please,
to everyone.
please do. Yeah. Well, I hope that no one needs expanded access and that you have an approved treatment that's effective, or at least a clinical trial. But if you do need expanded access and there's questions or support, and obviously, yeah, any patient engagement and things like this, as I showed my little input to how patient engagement can be done, then please, yeah, get in contact. I'd love to hear from you and work with you. So wish you a great day, and you've got an
Thank you.
amazing lineup. And yeah, what a pleasure and honor to be asked to speak. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Naomi. We appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Okay, have a great day, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.